No change. White House says Trump did not discuss his trip to the UK with Theresa May and a state visit is still on the table, but officials say his travel schedule is filling up. President Donald Trump did not discuss a trip to Britain with Prime Minister Theresa May in their most recent telephone call, the White House said last night. Downing Street insisted the invitation was still on the table, but offered no time frame, and U.S. officials have told how Mr. Trump's travel schedule is filling up. Yesterday it was revealed that the president had called off state visits to the UK over large-scale protests he is likely to face from the British public. White House officials said few discussions about the trip have taken place and the president is already expected to travel to Poland and Germany next month. He has also agreed to attend summits in the Philippines and Vietnam, while there have been discussions about visiting Japan and perhaps South Korea. A senior U.S. administration official said Mrs. May and Mr. Trump did not discuss the issue when they spoke by telephone on Friday, but they have on earlier calls. Meanwhile, a Downing Street spokesman said, "We aren't going to comment on speculation about the contents of private phone conversations." The Queen extended an invitation to President Trump to visit the UK and there is no change to those plans. Yesterday it was claimed Mr. Trump had called Mrs. May to tell her that he didn't want to visit the UK if there were going to be demonstrations against him, meaning his visit could be indefinitely postponed. It comes after large-scale protests around the visit hit London earlier this year while more than 300,000 people signed a petition urging Parliament to ban Mr. Trump from entering the UK. A call by Mr. Trump about the visit was made at some point in recent weeks and came as a shock to Mrs. May, a source told The Guardian. The source said they were present in Downing Street when the call came through. Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the opposition party Labour, tweeted yesterday that he was happy about the claims. Cancellation of President Trump's state visit is welcome, especially after his attack on London's mayor and withdrawal from Paris climate deal, he wrote. Mr. Corbyn was referencing Mr. Trump's Twitter attack on London Mayor Sadiq Khan shortly after the London Bridge terror attacks, which claimed 8 innocent lives. Mr. Trump mocked Mr. Khan for telling people not to be alarmed in the wake of the attacks, but the London mayor hit back and said the remarks were taken out of context. Mr. Khan said he was talking about the increased police presence on London streets, not the attacks themselves. But Mr. Trump continued his attack, saying Khan had to think fast to come up with his pathetic excuse of a response. The response from the British public was strong, with UK politicians and even Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling criticizing the president on social media. Mrs. May was the first foreign leader to visit Mr. Trump in the White House when she made an appearance in Washington, D.C. just 7 days after his inauguration. She extended a formal invitation from Queen Elizabeth II to Mr. Trump during that visit, and told the press she was delighted that the president has accepted that invitation. Some of Mrs. May's advisors had told her that the offer was premature and should have been put back a bit in the wake of his controversial Muslim travel ban, but could not be rescinded once made. Mr. Trump's relationship with the British public has been highly strained for years, particularly in Scotland, where his golf developments have upset locals. Last week Mrs. May told Mr. Trump she was disappointed at his decision to take the U.S. out of the Paris climate change agreement, although she did not join other European leaders in signing a joint statement condemning the action. His presidency and potential state visit sparked mass protests in London in February when he was accused of racism over his travel ban on 7 Muslim-majority countries, introduced in late January. In the same month, a petition calling for the president to be barred from the UK signed by more than 312,000 was delivered to Parliament, triggering a debate on whether Trump should be allowed to enter the country. The petition read in part, "Donald Trump's well-documented misogyny and vulgarity disqualifies him from being received by the Queen or the Prince of Wales. Therefore, during the term of his presidency, Donald Trump should not be invited to the United Kingdom for an official state visit." Anti-Trump protesters gathered outside the Parliament building calling for him to be banned, while inside politicians likened him to a petulant child, though both Mrs. May and her supporters were adamant that a visit should go ahead. The animosity felt towards Mr. Trump by the British people is likely to be a thorn in the president's side. An Anglophile who has long boasted of his British heritage, his mother, Marianne Trump, was born in Tong, Scotland. Mr. Trump longs for acceptance from the country. At the start of the year he sent the UK government a list of demands for his then expected visit. They included having the Queen join him for a game of golf on the 9-hole course at her castle in Balmoral, Scotland, The Telegraph reported. His PR team had hoped to replicate a photograph similar to the 1982 image of Ronald Reagan and the Queen riding horses together. He also wanted dinner at Blenheim Palace, Winston Churchill's birthplace, in Oxfordshire, England, and tea at Buckingham Palace in London, according to the Express. Mr. Trump is not the only U.S. president to face opposition from the British public. In 2003, George W. Bush faced thousands of protesters angry at the then recent invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. Between 100,000 and 200,000 people descended on London to protest while he was in the capital, culminating in the toppling of a statue of Mr. Bush in Trafalgar Square. His visit went ahead anyway,